Who is the dumbest person you've ever met? Story 1. An old coworker named James. We worked at McDonald's and were both 16. One time, while mopping the lobby, he for some unknown reason decided to chase a number of customers around with the mop, yelling, "I'm gonna get you!" He was fired on the spot. That's hilarious. James sounds like fun. He actually wasn't. This is probably one of the only good stories I can recall. He was the type of kid that would pay $100 for any drug, maybe get $15 worth, and then go brag about it. He also insisted that Texas was its own country and still part of the Confederate States. This is actually a pretty funny image, but you just can't do that to customers at work, James. Story 2. I've told this story before, but I like telling it because screw Tammy. I had a boss named Tammy. One night, we were all working late doing stock take, and we were discussing the impending lunar eclipse. Someone asked what happens during an eclipse. Tammy grandly explained that the eclipse would occur when America went in front of the moon, blocking our, or Australia's, view of it. Like, she literally thought that the Earth stretched itself into like a U-bend or neck pillow shape. Half of it stayed in our normal orbit, and the other half stretched itself over and around to casually block the moon for the rest of the Earth. I don't have enough processing power to imagine what her conception of our universe and its laws are. This is like a child's understanding of lunar eclipse that was told to her by a mischievous big brother. Not what I would expect from a grown woman. Story 3. I had a guy in a third-year undergrad developmental psych course raise his hand in a full lecture hall and ask the professor, "Professor, do infants diagnosed with SIDS get asthma later in life? Like, are they more likely to get asthma?" SIDS stands for Sudden Infant Death Syndrome. He just kept pursuing the question. The professor didn't understand how she could answer it. She thought that there was going to be some kind of logic in it that she wasn't seeing. Finally, some girl took the initiative to shout across the room, "No, they are not more likely to get asthma. They are dead. They have died suddenly and will thus not be at risk of developing asthma." Great day. He always sat in front of me and I would see him writing just absolutely horrible poetry and song lyrics. Giving him the benefit of the doubt here, he probably meant something like, "How likely is it that SIDS and asthma correlate?" or something like that. That's a good point. There's actually a proven negative correlation between SIDS and asthma. In fact, there hasn't been a single recorded instance of a SIDS sufferer developing asthma later in life. I can only imagine your professor's thoughts as she looked for a way to answer his question without embarrassing him in front of the whole lecture. You can't teach common sense. Story 4. I am half Korean and was going to high school in the Midwest during the 1992 LA riots. My typing teacher pulled me into the hallway and asked if I had an uncle or something I can call in LA to make the riots stop. She said she knew that we are all close and we all have stores and whatnot. Therefore, I must have a connection there. I was like, "Lady, even if I did have an uncle I could call, do you think he's Batman? Is your other half African American? Because I'm really not sure how being half Korean ties in with the rest of this story at all." The point is that the teacher was stereotyping Asian American families. "Hey, you're Asian, and Asian families are really close to each other and all run stores. You must have some really good connections because you're Asian." Saying half Korean is OP just being a little more particular about their circumstances. They aren't fully Korean, so they were just clarifying that they are Asian. Regardless of the other half, they are Asian enough to be stereotyped. Yes, thank you. Being half Korean in the Midwest at this time was super ethnic, at least in my town. Maybe he doesn't realize that the LA riots were primarily between the Koreans and the African Americans. Story 5. My cousin. All through public school, she was a snob who looked down on everyone. She was super stylish and struggled academically. We graduated in 2014. We both went to colleges, but not the same one. She got a job at a bar and stayed out late drinking. Her boyfriend told her she didn't need to complete college, so she just stopped showing up. Didn't drop, just stopped showing up. Completely flunked out. Here comes the mega stupidity. Our families lived hours away from her college at the time. Her family went to move her back home. My cousin's mom noticed a pile of clothes in the corner. The mom said, "What's that, your laundry? Pack it and we'll wash it when we get home later." My cousin, I kid you not, said, "You can wash those?" Turns out she'd been throwing away clothes instead of washing them. She claimed she didn't know she could, yet she washed her undergarments and bras without a hitch. She's now at home with her family and has started doing more chores to show an increase in responsibility. She still tries to throw clothes away, citing that she didn't know they could be washed and reused. It makes me wonder what she thought all those years before college, before she left home. She wore some of the same outfits repeatedly. She had to have known they could be washed. There's really only two options here, and I can't decide which is worse. The first is that she's been throwing away all of her clothes after a couple of uses and must be spending an unbelievable amount of time and money shopping. Option 2 is that she just never washes her clothes and is disgusting. One thing I find interesting is that she had zero qualms spending money she most likely didn't have on clothes, but never went grocery shopping for food. If she had done that, she could have cooked at home and saved funds to help with the next clothes shopping binge. How did she get all the way to college thinking her clothes were disposable? Her clothing budget must have been astronomical. Story 6. When I was in the Navy, there was a cook on my ship. He once served rare chicken. I genuinely couldn't tell whether he was trying to cover up his limitless incompetence or if he genuinely believed that rare poultry is a good thing. He was dumb enough to believe it. Another time, he just filled a pan with ground beef and called it meatloaf. Another time, he was supposed to make sugar cookies. You know, several hundreds of them for the whole crew. He didn't bother to read the label on the container he opened, and apparently he didn't taste the batter at any point, because he actually made salt cookies. He used up all the remaining salt in the pantry, and we had unseasoned food for the remaining several weeks of the mission, during which time the captain assigned someone to be the cook's bodyguard. Why not reassign literally anyone else to be the cook, and send the cook to, I don't know, pump the bilges? Different authorizations, though giving him potato peeling duty would probably be appropriate. Story 7. A girl my dad dated for a while. Even while dating her, my dad would say she was dumber than a bag of rocks. One day, she sat down to watch a movie with my dad. The movie was all about this guy and his twin brother. She sits and watches the whole thing, no interruptions. At the end, she turns and asks, "So there were two of him?" It would explain why she always had the TV turned to a music channel. Apparently, she couldn't follow normal TV or movies. Why did your dad date her? How hot must she have been to put up with that stupidity? I'd say she was above average, but not so much that it would be worth dating her just for her looks. I'm pretty sure he was dating her because then he could come live with her at the time when he didn't have the money for his own place, and because he's a smart guy that thinks he's the single smartest person to ever live. He likes feeling superior to other people, and that girl never challenged his feeling of superiority. Story 8. There was a troubled kid I went to high school with. He struggled with school and had friends, but was starting to do drugs and go down a bad way. He decided to photocopy the front and back side of a $20 bill, cut it out of normal paper, and glue the two halves with Elmer's glue. What's even more sad is that to test his new money, he went to the gas station and bought some gum, and it actually worked. So in his mind, it must have meant that it was foolproof. So he then tried to go and deposit the glued up money at an actual bank. He was obviously found out and arrested. I don't know where he is now, but I'm assuming he is making similar life choices. Another candidate for this thread would be the gas station worker who accepted the money. Depending on the business, they can be told to just accept it and then call the police after. A gas station attendant who is alone is probably safer not starting an altercation. Story 9. I had a next-door neighbor who robbed a Howard Johnson's at the top of our street at gunpoint, wearing a ski mask. He took the money, took off the mask, and was walking home 2 blocks down said street when cops pulled him over. They found the mask, the gun, and the money. He was wasted and asked them, would it help if I said I'm sorry? He got a couple of years in Rikers Island. He came out, broke into a local apartment house, stole some money and jewelry, and got stuck out on a fire escape when the ladder wouldn't go down. He had closed the window behind him. That got him a couple more years in prison. That's 2 stories, I guess. There's a few more, but you get the picture. He did leave me a box of cassettes when he went up one time. Among them was the Allman Brothers live at the Fillmore. I became a lifelong fan, so thanks, unnamed next-door failed robber. He was actually a really nice guy and, like a young Ray Liotta, handsome, just dumb as a brick. Story 10. Once at a restaurant in New Orleans, my friend ordered macaroni and cheese. At the table with about 15 other people, he says out loud, "How did macaroni and cheese become a thing?" To which I replied, "What do you mean?" He says, "I mean, it's so redundant, you know?" I say, "What? How is macaroni and cheese redundant?" And then he says, "Think about it. You've got cheese, and then you have pasta, which is made from cheese." He thought all pasta was made of cheese. I love that he used redundant properly while thinking all pasta was made of cheese. For some reason, that makes me happy. I don't know about you, but I really wish he was right. Story 11. My freshman year roommate dropped a class because he wanted to play his PlayStation more. It put him below the minimum credit threshold for his scholarships, and his parents owed $40,000. He was smart enough to get scholarships, yet dumb enough to make that decision. Nice. I would say that in these situations, there was a lot of parental control going on. Parents have pushed them and made all sorts of rules, like no games all their life, so when they get free in college, they break out and make bad decisions and their grades drop dramatically. Story 12. I worked on a hate press for about a month. Most guys had a high school education. One particular guy was telling me about a girl he was talking to on Tinder when he said that she was in New York and that he wanted to go visit her. I told him that that's pretty cool and New York will be quite the change from our little town. He then asked me how close New York was. We were in Washington State. He had no idea New York was over 2,000 miles away. To be fair, that's not really being stupid. That's just a lack of knowledge regarding geography. Lack of knowledge of the geography of our country that you live in is being stupid on purpose. New York is one of the most well-known states in the Union, so most Americans have some concept of where it is in relation to where they live. I'd say that this guy was being willfully ignorant. Story 13. When I was a teenager, my friend's older brother was one of the dumbest people I'd ever encountered. We once witnessed him trying to see inside a motorcycle gas tank using a Bic lighter. He assured us a lighter flame isn't hot enough to ignite gasoline. On another occasion, we got into a debate concerning the power of an atomic bomb. He was dead set on it only being able to take out like 2 houses max. This man went on to have multiple arrests before I moved away. He also fathered 3 children by 2 women. We all lived in a trailer court as well. I'm not saying it's a prerequisite for idiocy, but some of us get out, and some do not. What does he think an atomic bomb is? It's not a water balloon. Let's just say he didn't graduate. Come to think of it, I'm not sure he got through middle school. Story 14. Some guy I went to high school with was at a party and asked the homeowner if he could have her tattoo kit. She obviously said no. He left and came back an hour later with a ski mask on demanding the tattoo kit. He was arrested the next day. You can't make up that kind of stupidity. How he made it to high school is what I'm trying to understand. He must have showed up at his teachers' houses in a ski mask. Story 15. I once had a property manager who was the person in charge of the rental I lived in. Since homeowners lived out of state, she did a bunch of obnoxious things. My husband and I thought she was greedy and maybe getting money for herself and hiding it from the homeowners for repairs or something, because of these seemingly shady things that she would do when we had repairs. Then we mentioned something about gardening. She said, "You know, I've always wanted to try growing tomatoes and just watering them with salt water. That way the tomatoes would already be salted when you ate them." Huge reminder to never attribute to malice what is just pure old-fashioned being dumb as a rock. Hey, maybe she's onto something. Funny thing is, watering tomato plants with slightly salted water, diluted seawater, makes them tastier and richer in antioxidants. Story 16. I knew a guy in high school who I'm 99% sure only passed because he cheated like crazy and got tons of people to do his work for him. In grade 11, he was taking some kind of politics course and was writing an essay on American politics. We're from Canada. I agreed to edit his essay, and it was the most insane thing I've ever had to edit. There were multiple sentences that I couldn't understand until I asked him directly. He ended his essay with the phrase, "just like Jesus would have wanted." I don't even think he was a Christian. He also spelled Conga Lisa rice as Conga Lisa rice. Why did Canadian school kids have to do a paper on such contemporary American politics? We share the largest border in the world, and based on the US's track record, you probably want to check up on us every couple of months to make sure we aren't about to invade. Story 17. A guy I worked with named Buddy bought a huge Snap-on rollaway toolbox for over $3,000 on credit. 2 days later, he sold it to a coworker for $1,500 because he had some overdue bills and had to pay them. Needless to say, he never paid Snap-on for the toolbox, and he was off into the wind after being fired for starting his 4th fistfight at work. One of the guys I worked with told the Snap-on salesman where Buddy's new job was, and last we heard they are now garnishing his wages. The guy was a nutcase, though. He had very thin skin, and the slightest thing would set him off. He'd go absolutely nuts when he was set off, though. He yelled at the security guard and threatened to have him fired because he didn't like his tone. He almost got fired 3 times for fighting, but he was able to win the department manager over until the 4th time. Oh, and one time he was told to put caution tape across a malfunctioning gate and he said, "I don't know how." I used to think guys like this were outliers. Working in the oil field has shown me that this is not the case. Many people who work in oil fields make tons of money with little formal education. It's a breeding ground for stuff like this. Also, drugs. So many drugs. Story 18. This one lady at Atlanta's Beer, Bourbon, and Barbecue Festival who clearly didn't know where she was. I'm getting started on this rack of ribs, quietly minding my own business with a glass of beer, when from the group in front of me, this lady comes up to me and tells me how she can't stand the smell of meat, roasted or smoked, and tells me to get away from there. This is despite the fact that the event's name has barbecue in it and she had to pay $40 to get in. After she left, I had a good chuckle and facepalm with another lady at the table. But God, I've never experienced something more stupid in my life. Did you respond? With the most quizzical expression my face could muster through that delicious meat. In hindsight, I should have just opened my mouth and let her stare into it. How did this lady get into the event without knowing there would be cooked meat literally everywhere? Was it a complete lack of perception or just downright stupidity? Story 19. My friend's father robbed a bank in a small town in Indiana where he lived. This was in the late 70s or early 80s. He spent 10 years in prison for the crime. The same day he was released from prison, he robbed the same bank again. He was caught, and back to prison he went. He did not learn in those 10 years not to rob any banks or anything in that matter. My friend was like, "This is what every father does," and did not seem shocked over it. Yeah, the first time may be stupid, but the second time may have been smart for him. He just spent 10 years in jail. Every decision made for him, and he was fed and bed at no cost to him. It is a massive change to suddenly have a lot of responsibility. I'm sure it has way more to do with influence and security than responsibility. The day you get out after 10 years, you're a broken, unhirable nobody that might need to get your first meal out of a trash can if your family doesn't want anything to do with you. There's only one place in the world that makes sense and will make sure you don't starve. This may be true, but I still think there were smarter options than heading right back to prison. Story 20. I once called an Uber driver. When he arrived, he immediately asked me, "Are you going to X location?" I said, "No." He responded, "Great, because I'm not going to take you to X location." "Fine," I said. The journey got underway, and I was curious as to what he would have done if I'd said that I wanted to go to X location. So I asked him, "Hey, what would you have done if I said that I did want to go to X location?" He responded, "Look man, I'm not going to take you to X location, okay? I told you already." I was a bit befuddled, but I tried again. No, I don't want to go there. In fact, you already know where I want to go. It's your destination on the map. I'm just curious. What if I did want to go to X location? Would you have refused me the trip? Would you have driven off? He said, "Look man, I can't change the trip now, and anyway, I told you I refused to go to X location. You gotta understand, I'm busy." We spent nearly 15 minutes with variations on this back and forth. He was a fluent English speaker, by the way. By the end of it, I was 100% convinced that he couldn't understand the syntax of a hypothetical. He literally couldn't understand the question, if X situation, which is not the case, then what action would you take? I wasn't even mad, just astonished. How had he navigated through life thus far? What were his financial decisions like? I really wanted to follow him home and make a reality TV show about him or something. The guy is 100% an NPC. There's an item or some quest that needs completing before he'll take you there. I bet that location has good loot. Story 21. There was this guy in my aircraft technician class. I'll call him Jim. The module at the time was about electrical power. We were having a review one Friday before the exam started. Earlier that week, we had covered the batteries used on the aircraft, what types, how they were constructed, etc. The trainer turns to Jim and asks him about the different types, expecting him to say lead acid, lithium ion, and so on. Nope, Jim thinks for a moment and says AA, AAA, C. When we got to the hangar for work experience, the same trainer had lost all faith in Jim. We were all assigned jobs in the morning, me and another guy on wings, a couple more on landing gear, all down through the group. Then he gets to Jim. He placed an A4 sheet of paper on the ground and told Jim to stand on it so it didn't blow away. We all laughed, Jim included. The trainer was joking, right? He wasn't joking. Jim stood there all day. That's messed up. Not as messed up as the passengers could be if Jim got his hands on a commercial aircraft. Story 22. This girl I used to work with before she got fired. One day she came to work with a broken arm and claimed her boyfriend pushed her during a fight and she fell. We were all super concerned for her until she came in a week later saying she stabbed her boyfriend in the hand during a fight to get back at him for breaking her arm. Then a few weeks later she told everyone she was secretly trying to get pregnant, because if she got pregnant her unemployed boyfriend would have to get a job and help pay rent. She got pregnant and her boyfriend immediately dumped her. Phew, so many twists, but not in her fallopian tubes unfortunately. Story 23. There was this guy at my high school that wasn't too bright and was mostly harmless, but about halfway through decided he was going to be a thug. One day he goes into class of first years when their teacher wasn't there and robs all of their electronics, cash, and valuables at knife point without covering his face. And before he left, he gave them his real name, saying, "And you better not tell them it was me, Jim Conrad, that stole all your stuff." He then proceeded to leave school grounds with all of the stolen stuff, but decided against stashing it off campus. So he came back with all of the stolen stuff in his backpack and went back to spy on the class to make sure they weren't ratting him out while police officers were taking statements. This needs an ending. The kids all rat him out, and when he hears his name, he steps into the class proclaiming he'll gut them if they don't take back saying he did it. He did this with the officers still in the class and all his loot on his back. He was expelled and arrested, and when word got to our grades group, everyone just facepalmed. This guy sounds like a dumb bully from The Simpsons. Story 24. One of my roommates. I live in a house where we give interviews to prospective new roommates to make sure they're cool. We were interviewing a deaf guy, and he was looking like a good fit. We also have a list of rules and guidelines for living in the house, and one of the current roommates asks, "Oh man, are we gonna have to get the rules printed in Braille for a deaf guy?" Far from an isolated incident. Working as a waitress years ago, I had a hostess bring a Braille menu to a guest who was deaf. Unbelievably dense. A deaf person I know has had this happen several times. Story 25. One night during high school, my friend and I got invited to a party. I didn't drive back then, so my friend picked me up. All went well on our way to the party. On the way back, however, he got pulled over. As we were pulling to the side of the road, I told him that I was going to pretend to be sleeping, since I was the passenger. Anyway, I hear the cop get out of his car, walk toward our car, and stop at the window, but he doesn't say anything. I can feel the brightness of his flashlight, but I don't hear him or my friend say anything. After about what seemed like an eternity, I decided to open my eyes to see what was going on. That's when I see my friend, the guy who was driving, pretending like he was sleeping too. I just imagine the cops standing here waiting for one of you to wake up. It's a sleep standoff. They were still there at 3 as the school buses drove by. Best sleep those guys got all year. Story 26. I knew this guy in high school who really thought his practical jokes were hilarious. He would just do stuff designed to tick you off, thinking your salty reaction would make it funny. You may be thinking this guy's a jerk, but you'd be right. But also he's incredibly stupid, because every time someone said, "Dude, chill out with your crap," he just blew it off. Social stupidity, I guess. Well, one day he knocked this kid's hat off his head. These guys were friends, but clearly there was some hostility. Other kids picked up his hat and tells the prankster to go away. The prankster smacks his hat off again. The other kid tells him if the pranker knocks his head off a third time, he'd knock the prankster's head off. The prankster has a crap-eating grin, completely oblivious to how dead serious this guy was, and got absolutely clocked in the face when he messed with the guy's hat a third time. All he could say was, "What the heck, man, chill out," but no one was willing to hear him out. A quick question, is this guy now a YouTube millionaire? He definitely did not have the balls to mess with the strangers. He only did it to friends. I'm convinced it was a power play under the guise of humor. I had a friend just like this all throughout middle school and high school. He basically behaved like Eric Cartman from South Park, constantly acting as an antagonist towards our entire friend group. Looking back, he's lucky no one punched him for his antics. Story 27. I had a manager named Roxanne or Rocky. She was a bleach blonde, literally bleached her hair once a month, then wondered why it broke and fell out. Bubblehead, who only had the job because daddy owned the restaurant. Rocky was really obsessed with her looks and not much else. One day she told me and a coworker that she had her nose job done so that her eventual children wouldn't grow up with the same nose as her. She wasn't kidding. The coworker and I just looked at each other and walked away. We knew it wasn't worth the effort. Okay, to be fair, her children will grow up with the genetic nose and she'll have a different modified nose, so she's technically correct. Story 28. I am sure if I thought real hard I could come up with someone more stupid, but this story is pretty good. There was this receptionist at a veterinary office we have taken our dogs to over the years, who argued with my dad about how to pronounce his own name. He went in to pick up a prescription or something for our dog Daisy, and this girl asked the typical name of the dog, name of owner type questions. "We have it listed as Michelle, and you don't look like a Michelle," she says. Dad asked how it was spelled on the monitor, and sure enough, it was still spelled Michael. Michael, my dad's name. He said, "That says Michael, that's my name," and she argued with him about it. He had to get his driver's license out to show her, and even though she finally relented to let him pick up whatever it was he was down there to pick up, she was adamant my dad had been mispronouncing his own name for 50 plus years. The best part is, Dad tells us this whole story and we think nothing of it until like 3 months later when Mom took the dog in for a checkup. The girl still thought the owner of the dog was Michelle and that my mom must be in a lesbian relationship. Mom gently corrected the lady that it was Michael, and again this girl was adamant that it was pronounced Michelle. Mom, bemused, said something along the lines of, "It's literally a name from the Bible. It's pronounced Michael, and has been for thousands of years." The receptionist sat in silence outside of the minimal amount of talking needed for the rest of that visit. I've literally had this argument with people. You don't tell me how to pronounce my name. Spoiler alert, it's Michael. Oh, hi Michelle. It really does take a special kind of stupid to argue with someone about the pronunciation of their own name. Story 29. My mom's cousin was the getaway driver when his friends held up a 7-Eleven. He had some outstanding tickets at the time, and he was driving his moron friends home. He sped past a cop who inevitably pulled him over. He defended his bad driving by telling the cop he was just the getaway driver. Then he got arrested. He has since been arrested for a series of other similarly stupid crimes. He also believes that there's a global cabal of Jews who are out to get him. Recently, he got a DUI, which got his license revoked. This was obviously because of the Jews and not because he decided to drive drunk past a police station. When he was denied a gun license, that was the Jews at work. I have no idea why he thinks a global cabal would be focused on some moron from Saskatchewan. There is a global cabal focused on him, and it is called society, though there are many Jews in it. Story 30. When I was in the military, we had to halt a convoy due to a broken down truck, so I was standing around with a few others for security when I heard a driver behind us yelling for his squad leader. Looking to see what he needed, I observed thick smoke billowing from under his truck. He kept yelling, "Squad leader, my truck is on fire!" without getting out of his seat and attempting to extinguish the fire or remove the weapons, ammo, and sensitive electronics. I was dumbfounded. Too dumb for infantry. Imagine that guy in a firefight. "Sergeant, there are people over there who are shooting at me." I mean, there was a guy in my battalion who almost dropped a mortar round into the tube upside down. So, Story 31. I work for a small retailer and we had that guy for a while. He would call every day and ask the same questions. And no, not in different ways or something that could be construed as clever. This same person who couldn't figure out the key fob for his own car and had to have his 5-year-old daughter let him into his own car. He has kids. Let that sink in for a second. He's incapable of basic math. Besides addition and subtraction, we buy stuff, and when we tell him he gets 30%, he doesn't understand what that means. He also asks every time how much he's getting, despite not understanding the answer. I'm not sure he actually knows how to drive. We have a dumpster in our parking lot and he manages to bump it every time with his car. Every time he leaves, we have to go move it because he hits it on the way in and out. Back to the fact that he's a father somehow. He's also an awful parent. We have witnessed him telling his kids they are worthless and terrible, stupid, dumb, and any number of insults that are more applicable to himself. Unfortunately, that's not something we can report to CPS. I have watched him on more than one occasion fail to open the door to the bathroom and simply walk into it face first. He once came in with a hamburger of some kind and while eating it, pulled a packet of mustard out of his pocket. He did not put this mustard on his hamburger. He instead bit into the packet and sucked the mustard out. I can keep going. One time, he left his daughter in the car and she locked herself out with the key inside. Instead of walking 2 buildings down to the car repair place, he took a rock and broke the driver's side window. Our store has both a publicly accessible web page for making orders from home, as well as in-store kiosks. Despite him owning a modern Android smartphone and using it to look up food, he claims he doesn't have internet to use our website from home. His wife calls him just about every time he's in, and he lies to her every time saying he's on the way home and that he's stuck in traffic. As many of you might have guessed, he's not particularly well groomed, although he usually has something in his hair. What that something is, I'm not sure. I think that's all I've got. He recently moved further away, so we don't see him very often anymore. Pretty sure that dude's an alien. Thanks for watching until the end. If you have a similar story that you'd like to share, please leave it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and subscribe. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again, and see you next time.